Oh, no, Max, you don't have to hide your enthusiasm. I like it. How's it going? Hi, Sia. Good to see you here. Hope you're doing well. Hello, Xarni. Welcome, welcome. How are you doing? Hope everyone is doing well. We're just jamming out here before we get started. I feel like every time I stream now, we're just looking at my messy room. Ta-da! I haven't done anything. I just have stacked like 2 new art books and I haven't even bothered to put them in like the bookshelf. So, yeah. I'm very tidy and organized, as you can tell. Tia's doing great. In Greece at the moment. Oh, that's awesome. Hope I'm feeling better. Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I still have like a cough every now and again, but I think that's gonna just like go on for like, I don't know, weeks, if not months, you know? So that's fine. The boxes are actually unpacked. Like, that box is empty. The boxes below that have like a couple of frames, but they're basically empty too. So it's just like, I just have junk that I need to get rid of. We don't have a place to put it yet. So yeah. I need to figure that out. But what I'm actually trying to do with this room is, so we have like the nice shelf with all the books and stuff. I'm thinking that I want to get like a nice like 1-seater sofa, like in the corner with like a nice light like next to it, so that I can like read books at night. As like a healthier thing to do before sleeping, instead of just like sticking to my PC screen until I go to sleep. I'm thinking about that. So maybe we'll do that. Because otherwise, I don't know what I'm gonna do with that corner yet. We'll figure it out. Hey, Flamia, nice beard. Thank you. Appreciate that. Hey, Mr. G. Everyone is doing well today. Yeah, I'm doing good. Did you by any chance get stuck in like the voice room like overnight? Because you were in there for like a really long time. Hey, Frida's Art. Welcome, welcome. Yeah. Nacho cam. We could do a Nacho cam. But he's just never in the room. I'm just thinking about like the logistics of it. Like he's always like he's in the room like next, like right next to this one, because that's our bedroom and he's always on the bed. He's just chilling out now. Because we went for like a really, like we went for like a pretty long walk over lunch as well. Because I was working from home today. He's pretty knackered. Hello, Aladdin. Welcome, welcome. Cool. Everything seems to be good. What else has been happening? It's been a good but busy week so far. So as y'all know, I'm currently building a course, right? And we have like a whole bunch of people that are like helping me build the course as well, because I want to get people with the expertise of certain topics to write about those topics, right? Instead of me trying to do like everything under the sun. So I'm trying to get that organized as well. We have like a weekly meeting on Monday, and that meeting was small because most people are just like carrying on with the lessons, right? But it was small, it was good. We have a bunch of people making progress. It's just, yeah, I need to reach out to like a whole bunch more people, basically trying to do that on like a regular basis. Yeah, what else was happening? Yesterday had a meeting for the book. So we're trying to take like the environment handbook, like the environment art handbook, and we're redesigning it to make it like ready for print. That's what we're currently doing as well. We're currently a couple weeks away from having it all finalized, and then we can kind of send it off for like our first couple of test prints, and then we'll see how long the delivery and all that kind of stuff takes. What we're currently thinking is that we're probably going to do like a limited print, which is gonna be, let's say, like 100 books or something like that. And then we'll see how many people actually pick it up. And I'll probably, I don't know, I'll do something cool where like I'll sign like each and every one of them and then just send them out like myself. And then we'll see if the demand keeps up after that as well. It would be kind of cool to I'll definitely have like a back catalog of them just like at the house, so that if we have like more people interested, we can kind of send that out. But I would love to have like a more just like a more, I don't know, a more personal touch, especially on like the first batch of the books that are going to be out, right? So we'll see. Yes, exciting. I know. I'm really excited for that, honestly. It's also going to be cool to actually have it like physically in your hands, because it is going to be like a 250 page book though. So it's going to be really dense. But yeah, that's going to be good. What else are we doing? This is okay. So this is a thing that I've been trying out, and I'm going to give you all like a sneak peek, right? Because some people may have noticed that I have like some stuff over here, which may look like it has like the BE logo on it. So this is the thing that I've kind of been experimenting with like over the past weeks. And the intent is that the people that do workshops for us, I've always wanted to send them like a little like thank you package, right? But it's also like a good foray into potentially getting some merch for us as well. So you can kind of see this here now. Ta-da! Got like these cute BE mugs that I'm kind of drinking out right now. I've been kind of testing them for like the last couple of weeks, so that they like hold up and that you can wash them, and that like, I don't know, the print doesn't go like fades out and all that kind of stuff. I've been trying that out. And then we also have, this is actually something that I spoiled on accident like a while back, but we have these stickers, like these transparent stickers as well. You can just like tag onto stuff. And then we have like a couple more stickers. I have like postal boxes as well. But yeah, I'm just having fun and trying like a whole bunch of stuff. I've also printed like a bunch of stickers that completely like got fucked up in the design process, because I think what I did is I forgot to select like a transparent background. So I basically got like white circles, which is like, okay, cool. Yeah, that wasn't really that helpful. But yeah, basically what I'm trying like a whole bunch of stuff, and I kind of wanna like turn that into like some potential merch, or for people that are gonna be there on like the meetups that we will organize in the future, and just giving people like gifts, right? Because let's be honest, like none of all of this, what has been happening over the past couple of years, like is not going to be possible without like your support, right? So I'm trying to think about like really interesting ways of like giving back to people that have supported us for such a long time. So the logistics behind it, I'm still trying to figure out, but we'll see. I'm trying to understand what's going on. We'll dive into some feedback just in a bit, but I'm just basically explaining what's been happening like over the past couple of weeks with the work that I'm currently doing for our community Beyond Extent. God, that's so cool. That's so cute. Yeah. Oh, Hudson, thank you so much. I'm actually working with a layout designer already for the book as well. So we're making really good progress. So I'm excited to show that off. I'm really happy with the way that it's going right now. It's way cleaner than like the designs that I've done, and I think it's gonna look sick in print. So yeah, I'm excited about that. Looking up some awesome stuff for BE. Yeah, I'm trying to. So this is what I was talking about when all those months back I was saying that this year was gonna be a year of like reinvestment, right? And all the stuff that I'm trying to do now is basically what that comes down to, right? And we're trying to double down on like the core things, that we're trying to get out right now, right? So one of the other ideas that I have is that we've we've always talked about getting more workshops out there as well. I think we're gonna try our best to potentially double the amount of workshops at some point. I don't know when that's gonna happen, but that will be awesome. That's one thing that I have in mind as well. Just, yeah, getting more resources, getting more like really talented people involved, and then having like more material out there. I think that would be awesome as well. So that's one thing that we're still going to be working on, and I'm reaching out to people for that too. I'll send a CV, like a resume, since the book is so good. No BS, just straight to the point. Yeah. Hey, Crafter! Hi there! I actually just stumbled on your last review video and would happen to see you go live now. I checked out the site, but is the goal to be a resource for environment artists? Yep. That's 100% correct. So, I mean, I never do this, but like, I am an environment artist for like almost a decade now, myself. Well, specifically in games, right? I think that's a caveat that's worth mentioning. So, I started Beyond Extent like a couple of years ago to just give back to people. Becoming a member gives Discord access, but I wasn't sure what comes with that. Not sure if I would have enough pieces frequently to get reviewed. It's not only to get reviewed, but you also get like the Environment Artist Handbook, which is actually the book that we're kind of talking about, like in PDF form. And it's like a 250-page book with like a bunch of tips and tricks for environment artists. But yeah, I think everything should be explained on the website. So yeah, good to see you here though. And if you have more questions, feel free to let me know. Hey, Bulborb! Yeah, so in terms of what's been happening in the last couple of weeks. Let's see. I'm just looking at like all my post-its. The book is making good progress. Yeah, setting up the business was took a little bit of time as well, but that's like all done now. Everything, there's a lot of admin work, you know, like running a business. There's like a lot of background admin work that no one ever gets to see. Yeah, I'm honestly really happy with the state of it now. I feel like there's, especially when it comes to the back end of things, I feel like everything is like really stable right now. And yeah, I think we're just going to double down on what we do well. Hudson, does BE have enough income for you to do this full time? So I used to do this full time, right? Before I took this job and I moved to the UK, I used to do BE full time for like 2 years straight. The issue with that was that, well, there were a couple of issues with that. And I don't think I've ever been like really open about that. I think the first issue, looking back on it now, is that I personally squandered a lot of the opportunities that came with that. Whereas where I should have doubled down and like made a whole bunch of more resources and did a whole bunch of more live streams and all that kind of stuff, I honestly just focused on like getting all like the back-end stuff and like really good quality, and wrote like a bunch of articles that are now just like on the website, right? But I didn't focus on like the visible stuff. That was like issue 1. And then also like the income, because I don't want BE to be like all about me, right? Like I'm definitely like the front man of like BE, right? If you want to call it that. But I would love it to be that BE is like more about like environment artists making resources for environment artists, right? So that was always like, that's the reason why I call it Beyond Extend, and I didn't call it like, I don't know, Timothy Dries' like art corner or whatever, right? So yeah, technically it could, but then what would happen is that a lot of the income would just go to my living expenses, and that would basically limit the amount of stuff that I could do with the money that was coming in to then like expand with Beyond Extent, right? So I took this job basically to do exactly that, to like reinvest all the money coming in into Beyond Extent. And that's what we're currently seeing right now. More marketing for more success? Yeah, it's not only marketing, right? But that's definitely like a part of it. It's just building more resources and more things that can help people, right? So the course is obviously like a big part of that, which is like the biggest thing that we're currently working on. And yeah, just the mentorship side of things as well, where we have like 3 mentors in total, including myself. Like myself, Adam, and Ioana. We're starting up like the mentorship program as well, which we tend on expanding on in the future too. So I'm currently seeing this as like the long-term plan would be that BE becomes more of like an online school, right? So we have the course that is then supported by mentors and people like myself, right? So that would be like the long-term goal. And we're gonna kind of build it up into like the way that we're doing it now, right? Like a very community-oriented like goal. Current community is already a great success. Just keep it going, man. Yeah, I think so too. I'm honestly really happy. I'm like really self-critical as well, but I'm honestly really happy with the state that the community is in currently. And I could honestly not be happier with like all the support that I've gotten like over the years, and just like the amazing people that we've met. And honestly, like the amazing stories that I keep hearing from just people meeting through Beyond Extend, even without like my input or whatever, right? I think that's the beauty of it. That like people get to meet each other, like let's say in a team challenge, right? And then they start building things for themselves because they met through that challenge. I think there's a lot of beauty in that. Yeah. Oh, thanks guys. Appreciate it. All right. Enough of a ramble. I'll give you like a quick introduction for people that are new to this event specifically. But Whip Wednesday is basically my weekly check-in with the community, right? So I'm gonna go through people's work, and then I'll give feedback where people have questions or want to get feedback from myself, right? So we're gonna take like, let's say 2 hours, two and a half hours to just go through people's feedback and see how we can improve their work together. So if you have any questions, or if you want to like just pitch in with ideas yourself, feel free to do that. So let me switch on over, and then we're gonna have a look here. We do this guy. Got 10 people today, so it's not gonna be as busy of a stream as it was last time. But yeah. Hi Chetan. One question is that if Megascan props or assets are used while making an environment in Unreal, then what influence do they have on a recruiter, and what does the portfolio viewer think? So this is actually like a very common thing that I recommend people to do, right? So if you have an environment that is based around like, let's say an altar that has like a sword on it, and you kind of have like a bunch of candles around it, right? If you then use Megascans or other things to populate like the world around it and make it look like it's in the middle of the forest, then that's fine, because you're not replacing the most important thing in your environment with something that is scanned or made by someone else, right? That's the way that I would always use it. So let's say if you just make a single prop, but then like the background is made with Megascans, no big deal. Right? It's only when, let's say, you were to use like the asset itself from Megascans and then build yourself a world around it, then you're doing it the complete opposite way. You shouldn't be doing that. So yeah, it doesn't really matter. Like honestly, what it does show you is what it does show the recruiter or the person looking at your portfolio is that you're interested in certain things, and you're less interested in other things, right? So for example, with the shrine where you have like foliage in the background, that's like a very clear example that you don't want to do foliage, but you have an interest in like assets. Greetings from Russia. I'm now studying environment art in the course. Have a good stream. Oh, thank you so much. And best of luck in your studies as well. what about sourcing tileable materials from Megascans, but you made all the assets? Depends on what you mean with that, right? Like if let's say you make an asset and then you present it on like a tileable fabric, that's fine. If you modeled all the assets and then make like texture it with tileable materials from Megascans, then you just have to like be really honest about like what you're showcasing, right? Because in that case, you're showcasing your modeling skills instead of your unique texturing skills, right? Texturing something with tileable materials does have a value though, because that's honestly what you might be doing in a lot of cases in the industry. If you can't rely on like the time necessary to make like a unique asset, for example, right? So let's say you have to make a gate, like just a simple medieval stone gate, right? You would probably use tiling materials for that. And those tiling materials would then probably be made by like a material artist themselves. So use Megascans if you know how to create one at least. Many people use it, but many also don't know how to create one like that, or at least basic. Yeah, I don't think... It depends on what you mean, right? Because if you use a Megascan tree and you don't know how to make it, that's not too bad. If you use a tileable texture but you don't have an idea on how to make a tileable texture, I would definitely try to make a tileable texture first. That's the way that I would see it. So I agree partially with that statement. Ryan is saying, cool to see the behind the scenes stuff. Appreciate the hard work. Looking forward to seeing everyone's work today. Yeah. Yeah. Appreciate all the support as well, Ryan. I really do. Okay. Let's get into things. But thanks for the question, though. If people have more questions, feel free to add them in the chat. Let's go through this one by one. So, first one is Amma. Amma is working on a 1960s power plant control room. Okay. And Amma would love to get some feedback towards the texturing of the table. So we have the reference down here. That's the reference, and then the rest of it is made by Amma. Let's see. The first thing that really pops up depends, right? Because I think the key word here is that you wanted to go for like a recently abandoned control room. Because I would say like there's some nice brown tones, like rusty kind of tones that are missing. Right, so maybe you can incorporate them. But maybe in like a more subtle fashion. Right, because this one doesn't necessarily look like recently abandoned, but I like that it adds another color to the whole space, right? Or like to the whole prop. Because right now it feels very grayish and bluish, right? If you can then like infuse like a little bit more color variation by introducing like a warmer color, like this reddish bluish tone, you could really use that to like add some interesting variation in the color. That's the first thing that pops up. Let's see. After thinking back and forth with trim sheets and whatnot, I went with a 4K texture. Is that acceptable for a production portfolio project? Yeah. Yeah, you can use a 4K texture. So it depends on how you use it. Because this is like a bigger asset, and you want to like texture it uniquely. So you can definitely use like a 4K texture in that. The thing that I would usually say though is you might be able to get away with a 2K if you then are smart and optimize like, let's say some drawers or let's say some drawers, and you overlap the UVs. You know, let's say that this drawer over here is the same as like this one over here, right? Just making sure that you never stack them up in a way where it's like really visible. That could be a way of saving space. Especially looking at like the bigger sections, right? You have two of these guys, right? The two consoles, right? Maybe you could do something where you like symmetry those. And then also looking at like the big table itself. How would you optimize that? Texture wise, right? I don't know if this is laid out like I don't know if this is laid out like uniquely for both sides, but if it is, you're not making like the most optimal use of like the underside of things, right? Because that is like a huge space on your like UVs for like no real gains at all, because no one's ever gonna look at the bottom of it. So yeah, like a 4K, like it still holds up, right? But you want to optimize. You want to optimize your UVs as much as possible. And be smart with reuse. Basically comes down to the same thing, but yeah. Sack it and get down to 2K. Yeah, that's the thing. It also depends. I'm gonna be very honest, like if wait, hold up, let me make this clearer. If this is a prop that you're gonna break down, then you would need to like optimize it further. If you're not, then you can kind of leave that, right? Most of it is symmetrical, actually, but yeah, the underside is just there. Yeah, that's the thing. With the underside, what you could do... Okay, so with the underside, what you could do is you would have the top and the lip. Right, so you would have the top and the lip. You would unwrap those. And then you would take the underneath of the table and just like overlay that onto the top again. The reason why I include the lip is because if you were to divide it like straight down the middle, you're gonna get like butterfly mapping, right? And we're gonna really noticeably see that you did like a split down the middle. So just include that small lip and then just overlay the bottom on the top of it again. And that saves you like a whole bunch of space, right? The book is too expensive. Okay, fair enough. If a membership, how many months till the book? You get it instantly. It's not listed like that. I'm not sure how I listed it. But yeah. So let's see. 4K is fine. And then there's another question as well. I have a few more large-scale assets I want to add to the scene. Any advice on how to texture them, since they have big surfaces like control panels? With control panels, the only thing that you really want is like some sort of like surface variation around like the dials and like some of the handles and all that kind of stuff, right? So I would just honestly look at like how much you can reuse and probably go with like a mid-poly workflow or something like that, where you just use mid-poly and then you just work with like sidable textures. And then you add like decals on top of it. right? So that's probably the way that I would play it. Or another way could be, let's call it A and B. Is that you, let's see, let's have a look at the image. So there is there is potential here to do like a modular setup. Where you could, let's see, where you could build it up with trim sheets, right? Like you're doing for the rest of your scene. Build it up with trim sheets, have an RGB mask that kind of controls like dirt and like all that kind of stuff. And then add variation in that mask through like a world position thing. And then what you could do is just texture all of these roughly the same. And then you just get that variation by just moving it in the world, right? And then you just have like a mask that kind of creates like a variation on top of it based on the world position. You could do it that way. And then all these are just like the same, even with the same RGB mask. And then you just create variation on top of the RGB mask by just having like a world-based like mask on top of it. However, that also gives you like the flexibility of, instead of using like the world-based mask, you then also just add like a different RGB mask if you wanted to, right? So yeah. A baked RGB mask? Yeah. Yeah, the way that you would do it is you would just bring your asset into Substance Painter, unwrap it as it was like a unique asset, and then just basically make masks for where you want like another tileable to be assigned to your base mesh, right? So you could say like, oh, I want like a little bit of dirt here, and then store that information inside of like a texture, which is like the RGB mask, and then just populate that mask with whatever you want, right? So that would be like the second option. But the reason, the first one was the mid poly one, and then the second one was RGB mask, and then like a world-based variation. The reason why this is number 2 instead of number 1 is because I feel like if you want to get away with a scene that is recently abandoned, you are not going to have a lot of dirt and a lot of grime on top of that, right? So that's why maybe just using like a basic like mid poly and then just adding like decals on top of it where you have like drips and like leaks and all that kind of stuff. Just playing around that way, it's probably going to work better. But it's also kind of up to you, right? Like what kind of workflow you want to use, what kind of shaders you have lying around, like all that kind of stuff. I don't know a world-based mask. So if you want to look this up on Unreal, you kind of have to look for world-based variation. I think that's going to give you like a good idea. Is this mentioned in the book? I'm not sure actually. I think it is. And yeah, you must do a new UV set. That's true. Chetan and Supon, let me actually have a look at your questions. So, Supon, can you let me know what you mean specifically? Because that's like a super broad question. Because you're asking if you have any advice when working in a team as an environment artist. That is like pretty broad, right? So, if you wanna help me like nail down what you're struggling with, for example. Thank you, that was very insightful. No worries. Thank you for the question as well. And then as we move on to Plex is up next, let me actually have a look at Shetan's question. One more. I have made large area environments. Looking from above, it's not looking great, but individual renders are very satisfying. What should I do? I'm not sure if it's... So, I'm not sure what you mean with that 100%. But if you're looking from above and it doesn't look great, then don't look at it from above. If the individual renders are very satisfying, just stick with the individual renders, right? Like your job as like an artist is to sell the artwork that you do, right? If you then decide like, hey, I take like, let's say a top-down screenshot and that screenshot is looking ugly, then don't present it that way, right? You don't really have to show like all of it all at once, right? You can just have like individual renders, and if they look really good, just stick with the individual renders. Amma is saying, I like the Rust because it didn't... I like Rust, but because... Oh, sorry, I read that wrong. But because it didn't seem realistic to add it, I didn't do it, but now I'm reconsidering. Yeah, so I think this comes down to a principle where whatever we do for game art, right? For like a game scenario, always is going to be overemphasized compared to what you would normally see in real life. So we have to make it look cooler than it actually is in real life, right? I always find it hard that grunge on my textures is repeating and it looks fake on my work. Yeah, that's why you can't just stick with like one grunge texture. You actually need a whole bunch of them, or do something in your material inside of Unreal so that you have variation built into your decals or however you're using them. Ryan is really liking the scratching the details on the left side and the wear on the drawer slides. Lots of fun grunge to play with this type of asset. Yeah! Ryan is as supportive as ever because he's looking forward to seeing updates and how you tackle optimization in the next asset. Yeah, me too. Yeah, this is already setting like a really good quality bar. I mean, not this work that we have on screen right now, but like the work that we just saw from Amma is already setting like a really good quality bar for the rest of the scene. I'm excited for it. Ping me a message, Amma, on Discord, and then I'll send you some ref as well, because I took some ref from like older console panels that were used in like these situations, in like control rooms and all that stuff. I have some good ref for that, so I could send you that. So, advices on working in a team as an environment artist, as an entry-level artist. Okay, that doesn't really tie it down that much, but let me give you like some general tips, right? If you're starting out as like an entry-level environment artist in a team, you want to ask a lot of questions. You want to be as open with your work as possible and communicate a lot with the rest of the team, right? There's gonna be a lot of new things and a lot of questions because you might be working with like an in-house engine that is completely different to what you're used to. So whenever you run into like anything, just ask a whole bunch of questions. That's totally fine. Yeah, just make use of like the talent that you have around you, right? And I know this is going to be somewhat difficult, but like feel free to also share your opinions about things, right? If you have ideas on how you could potentially do stuff, try to be as open and as vulnerable as you can be with sharing those ideas too. Anchor Gupta, thank you so much for the question. As an experienced artist, is a graduate certificate necessary to get a job in countries like the UK? It definitely helps. It depends on where you come from, right? But a degree, like a bachelor or a master or anything like that, is definitely going to help in the visa process. And unfortunately, we now have to deal with like the UK not being a part of like Europe, right? Which was like a benefit before that. Now it does become like a little bit more tricky. I think from what I know, I think it's still a bigger leap to go to America, for example, but it can definitely help. And maybe, I don't know if you're very specific with your wording, but like a graduate certificate is still different than like an actual degree, right? Because if you follow an online course, you usually get a certification, but that is still not going to be as helpful as like an actual bachelor degree, for example. So yeah. Environments look easy, but it's actually really technical work. Oh yeah. It's, yeah. It's a whole bunch of work. And are the nodes the same in other engines that are not public? Nope. It can be completely different. Hey, Nix4D, thanks for the follow. I think on a wide view shot, it would be good to make some accents with the lights, make everything more dark and add like a lamp light accent on one desk. I think that's honestly what we talked about last time as well. Just to have like a bit of a focus on like a certain area. And I think that happened a little bit because I have the feeling that there's like a slight difference between like this one and like the rest of the environment. But I don't think it's enough yet. Yeah, as we're diving into this. Yeah. First of all, making really good progress though. I'd like to see like all the props that are like actually textured and like made compared to last week. So definitely making good progress on this one. Let me get some context from Plex in just a little bit. Oh, Sapun. That's awesome. Hope it's helped me from the beginning and I will never forget what you've done. That's awesome. Best of luck in the job hunt. In film, there's no optimization, just speed of delivery. Well, yeah, because like in film, everything is like pre-rendered, right? Or like offline rendered or whatever you want to call it. So they don't have to care a single bit about like optimization because it doesn't have to run like 60 frames, like 60 times like every second, right? So they just have to focus on just getting the stuff done, making it look cool, and then just sending it off to like a render farm somewhere. And then just having it rendered out like frame by frame. They literally just throw, like a VFX company can literally just throw like more money at the problem to render stuff more quickly, to a certain degree, of course. Whereas like in games, we're restricted by the hardware that people actually have. So yeah. Let's dive into Plex's work as well. So I would like to ask feedback about the composition and the storytelling. Is it readable? Some of the assets are not ready. Should I add a block meshes instead of them? Yeah, always. Always add like very basic meshes to already get an understanding of what the scene is going to be looking like, even if they're not textured yet. So this is like a very common thing, right? Game development is about iteration, iteration, and iteration. So the sooner that you can get stuff into the games engine, the sooner that other people can actually see it and help you make things better, right? So that's the reason why we do blockouts, because then we can just like have like some sort of representation in the engine, and then other people can actually start like coming up with like cool ideas, and then that's where the creative process like really happens, right? So always add blockouts. and you want to focus on the iterative part of the machine. Let's see. The composition and storytelling. I don't think the composition has changed too much. I think honestly a lot of it's going to come down to number one, where if we look at this, if you turn this single frame to grayscale, nothing's really going to stand out just yet. So try to convert it back to just like black and white and see if it really helps you focus on the things that you want to stand out, right? So you want to check in black and white. Always want to do a value check. The story is an employee making overtime to finish reports. Yeah, I could get that. Like, especially like the little paint over that you did, like below here, right? Or like the representation. I feel like this is good. You could even make it like more frantic, and yeah, add more chaos into the mix, right? Because you've kind of just kept it like pretty simple, but you can like go really chaotic, right? Like look at like a really chaotic desk and see what that means. Like have these folders like really stacked up high, right? And then have maybe like, oh no, like one of the folders slid down and it's just like, I don't know, balanced on the desk here. And then maybe there's like more coffee mugs on the table, and like there's like coffee stains all over the table as well because it doesn't have like time to clean up. Like sometimes you have to like overemphasize a story to like really hammer it down, right? You wanna oversell the story and like make it really immediately. Because that's the thing, right? Like this is actually a good way of thinking about it. Like you could turn down the lights on like all the other. Let's see. Let's actually do like a quick paint over, right? So opacity 200. Nope. So let's shine a light on this guy. Especially the foreground needs to go a little bit because that's taken up a lot of the attention. Right? And this is going to be quick and dirty. So this is not going to look good. But this is sort of the effect that you want to create, right? We can do that with lighting by itself. However, you could also reinforce that with other things as well. So let's say this is the only cubicle that has like files like literally stacked up until like it's almost overflowing, right? And it's ridiculous, like the amount of folders and the amount of papers that are just like on the desk and like underneath the table and like all that kind of stuff, because then all the rest of it is like super neat and tidy, but this has like a lot of chaos and like a lot of stuff just like building up on top of it, right? You could kind of use that as well. That's like a way to add contrast, right? So the first way we did it in lighting, but we could also do that in just the amount of clutter and the amount of detail that we add to the scene as well, where the rest of the scene we try to keep like very sterile and we keep it very clean, but then we add a lot of detail to the point where we want people to look, right? So those are like two things, like two levers that you can kind of use to like sell or like focus people to a certain point. Okay? There's more than that, but I'm going to keep it pretty simple for this one. But that all leads you to like this point over here, right? More focus on the focal point. There's so many ways that you can do that. I gave you like 2, but feel free to like experiment with that as well. Let's see. Added a clock on the wall. Should point to the late hours. Cool. Yeah, I think this is good. You need to just oversell the story a little bit more. And yeah, contrast things up, right? Like make it really stand out. And you get to choose, right? If you feel like the folders and the stacking up of boxes like kind of looks ridiculous, you don't have to do that. But then find another way where you could then emphasize this specific cubicle compared to the rest of the cubicles, right? Max is saying in the chat, switch off the light in the whole room. That could work as well. Like that's one of the options that we have, right? I think if you're going for like a really late evening mood, that's like honestly like the best way to show it, because then you get the feeling that everyone else went home and this is the only person that's still here in this building trying to get stuff done, right? So in that case, in this story, it's actually like a good way of doing it. Yeah, definitely up the clutter as well. Even without going like completely nuts and having like towers of it, right? Like you could still add more to it as well. Frida is really liking the retro vibes. Also, a lot of clutter is fun. Thinking some posters and stuff on the wall could be interesting too. Yeah. I feel like the yellow shade of the carpet, the posters, the post-its, the folders, and the pillar are too similar and could use some separation. I see what you're saying. I don't necessarily think so. If there was one thing that I would like try to simplify, it's actually the amount of visual noise that there is in the scene by itself, right? And I think a lot of that noise comes from the heavy contrast that we have between the black pillars and the white boards in between them. And because when I'm talking about like visual noise, it's just the amount of contrast and the amount of stuff that's happening here. So I always try to strip things down to like the base values. So let's say these are just like cubes next to cubes, right? And that cube is black and that cube is white. That is going to introduce like a lot of contrast. So maybe changing the pillars to something that matches the white more is going to really ease up like the amount of like visual clutter that you have in the scene, potentially. But again, this is where it comes down to try to figure out point one first, and if it still doesn't work with the style that you're going for, you might have to change the materials to add like some subtlety and like less contrasting elements into the scene. Let's see, Ryan is saying, I wonder if the clock on the desk in the cubicle might help keep the focus in the middle rather than pulling out the focus to the clock in the back. I think that's a good shout. Yeah, because it does feel like it's slightly out of frame, but it also makes me wonder, I mean, you could definitely like frame it more, right? Just have it like a little bit more space. So like this would be like rotating your camera like slightly up, right? So that you have like a little bit more space on the top of the frame. And then turning down the lights on like the entire environment, and then having the light on the clock still there and the light around this desk still there. I think that could be good. Because then again it would turn it into let's see. Okay, so we're trying to do this. And again, I'm just looking at it in terms of like lighting value, right? Like, what are we trying to say here? And that already brings more focus to the elements that matter to the story that you're trying to say, right? Which is why last time we talked a lot about story, because the story is actually the driver of like a lot of the other elements within your scene. So you can see that if you're trying to tell a story of like, hey, this person is staying late, we want to emphasize the things that make them feel like they're staying late, right? So the emphasis on the clock, the cigarette butts, like his cubicle is the only one that's lit up, like all those things like emphasize the story. Yeah, those are some great points. I feel it might help if the yellow folders were lighter on the other desk and heavier in the center. That could also work. Yeah. It's getting pretty specific because then it kind of starts to feel like the whole yellow paint situation, right? Like that's a thing that people go crazy off like every once in a while. Where if you start doing those things like in a very specific manner, it starts to feel like pretty unnatural. So if you do it to a certain degree, that could definitely help. If you go too far with it, it looks like you're doing it like with a purpose, right? And you kind of don't want to have that necessarily. Backup daily post-it? Oh, I didn't even notice it. Where's it down? Oh. Oh my god. Dude, I thought it said like buckle up Billy. I don't know why it said that. Yeah, but this makes total sense. I was like, why does it say buckle up Billy or Daisy or something like that? Yeah, backup daily actually, yeah, makes a whole lot of sense. Thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, cool stuff, Plex. Great progress. Like we said, always do blockouts and think about the iteration. And yeah, looking forward to more updates. At the age of 24, with 2.5 years of experience in prop art, what recruiters expect for an entry-level environment artist? Storytelling. I honestly want to see you build stories in your environments. You can already do this. Shetan, thank you for the question. You could already do this on an asset though. Like you can already showcase those skills, right? Like instead of like making a cash register, right? I'm thinking about like Hannah Watts's work, for example. Let's assume we're making a cash register. Cool. What kind of shop is this for? Who owns the cash register? How long have they worked there? What kind of job is it? You can do so much things with those questions and make it like a really unique cash register compared to just making like a really cool cash register that doesn't say anything, right? That's the power of it. I think once you start making that transition and then you start building up to like, let's say a diorama and then do a couple of dioramas and then maybe even go for like a full scene. That's the way that I would play it. I'll be honest, like I always had a love for environments myself, so my whole portfolio was just like full environments, right? But I got hired as my first job mostly to do props. So I did like 2.5 years of like just props and just baking, texturing, all that kind of stuff. And then I moved over to making environments, right? For Ubisoft. So yeah. It's just you gotta think about like, or maybe I'll give you like another thing. Like look at people that got recently hired as environment artists and just look at what they have on their portfolio, right? Hudson is asking, am I included in here? If you signed yourself up for Whip Wednesday, you should be, yeah. So I'm not sure. I always keep forgetting who you are on the server, but yeah. You have to tag yourself though. Like if you tag yourself for Whip Wednesday, then I'll have a look at it. Because sometimes people also just love to share their work, but they don't want me to like reveal it, like review it so publicly. I think that's fine too. Note to hustle culture and overtimes, make it early morning, have a life outside of work. what age did I first work? It kind of depends. Like I started working like doing student jobs like on a regular basis at 16. And I've always had like a weekend job or like a summer job since then. Like I would like my year was basically like working in like a Chinese restaurant doing the dishes. And then over the summer I would do that and like other work on top of that as well. But my first actual professional artist job was when I was 2024, I think. Let me think back. Yeah, 24. My first industry, like games industry job. Okay, next one up. We got Adam. Need to go? Thanks for the feedback. No worries. Thank you so much for showcasing your work, Max. Looking good. Let me just take care of like my OCD outlining stuff. Oops, forgot to tag. Maybe next time. Yep. Remember to tag it. Okay, so Adam is looking for feedback on the bricks. Oh, I only read that part. As well as some ideas of what I can do with the background, as well as mid-sized assets to add. Composition feels a little bit empty at the moment. Let me add this guy in here really quick. A splonk. Okay, so actually, never mind. It's all good. Where to submit? Should I pay first? Yes, this is exclusive for people from the community. This stream right here. You will not be able to submit for today's stream though. You will be able to submit for next Wednesday. Okay. So some feedback on the bricks. I would honestly, like, this is why I had it like so laid out, is for the bricks, I would say some better ref, please. That's honestly where I would start, because if this is the ref that you're using, it's kind of hard to get like any good information out that, right? So I'm assuming that you have like better ref out there. But like these ones, they don't really do a good job, honestly. Like we're not really getting like a lot of information, right? And like on stream, they're like a bit more pixelated as well, so keep that in mind. I made them smaller. Yeah, the only thing that I could see is like stuff where you have like little nicks and like damaged edges, right? That could be cool to see. So a little bit less uniform edge damage. That's where I would start. Because honestly, like the tiles here, they feel like pretty basic. They have like a stereotypical, just like little bevel on the edges. But yeah, I think you need to vary up like the edges a little bit, make them sharper as well, so that you have like a little bit more like well-defined like bricks going into it, right? And then add like ever so slightly. Doesn't have to be everywhere, right? But like slight kinks in the whole thing. Like slight edge variation. And then also just like a slight rotation on everything too. On all the bricks, that helps a lot as well. And I'm talking about like a 0.01 like rotation on all the bricks is usually like really helpful just to break up like a little bit of that, right? You might already have that, it's just like we're not really seeing that much of it at this angle, right? I am liking like the variation that you have here though. I think that's going to be really cool. I don't know if that's like a separate material that you're going to vertex paint in and all that kind of stuff, but that's looking interesting. Yeah. I think it's definitely the edges that are just like throwing me off at the moment. Yeah, just like breaking them up. That's going to help a lot too. Working on finding better refs. Yeah, I mean, for this stuff, I think... I mean, maybe these are all from the train, right? Who knows? But you could just like walk up to those buildings, right? I'm assuming that this is like... I think I saw like Stockholm somewhere. So I'm assuming that you can just like walk up to the wall and take pictures. It could be cool. And let's see. And then we're also talking about like some ideas, what I can do with the background, like the background of this guy. And then also what you can do with like some mid to small size assets to add. Was this based on a concept? Yeah, it was. Yeah, I would definitely have a look at the concept again. I think a lot of it is gonna come from like the texture work, right? Like actually, I'll pull the concept up on screen as well. But there's like a beauty to what the concept does, right? And it's like its simplicity and like its very graphical approach to like the shapes. So in that way, I don't think you necessarily need to have a lot of assets or like a lot of things to add to the foreground, but just look at what they did with the background, right? For example, just having like a couple buildings in the background, the tentacles are going to be cool. You just look at like how everything is laid out like very purposely in like a triangle composition. And then it's just going to be texture work, honestly. Some of this like fabric-y looking stuff where it's almost like, I don't know, like seaweed that kind of just like blew up to like the banisters and kind of got wrapped around it. That could be cool to include. But I honestly don't think you need to do that much. And if you want to do something, try to do something along the lines of just like, it's like a small fishing harbor or something like that, right? Where you have maybe some fishing nets or some crab pots or something like that. That could be cool. Get refs from ArtStation as well as real life refs. Definitely more than a couple references to get a bunch of ideas on how to get the look you're going for. I would actually not recommend getting reference from ArtStation. I think it's always better to go for real life references and then filter it to your artistic vision. Rather than already taking someone else's filtered vision and then turning it again into like a filtered vision. That's the way that I would prove it. Because there's some cool stuff out there. Some fishing equipment, cool stuff. Yeah, I think that could be cool. Yeah, it just depends. It just depends on how much you want to stick with like the concept, right? And how much you want to deviate from that. Maybe even following the composition as well, because the composition is like the composition and framing, right? I should clarify that. Like the framing of the picture is like very, very purposely driven to be a portrait picture, right? Because right now I think that's what you're feeling as well. You do have like a lot of dead space, but that's because you switched from, and this makes total sense for like a game render, you switch from like a portrait to like a landscape. Maybe it might be a cool test to like switch it up to like a portrait render instead. And that might honestly help you with the feeling that you probably have right now, where you feel like you have to like do something in the middle there. Fishing stuffs. Gonna Gonna revisit those locations more once I'm in Stockholm. Yeah, I think it doesn't even need to be Stockholm necessarily, right? You can probably find like most of those like walls like on any building. Not any building, but there must be like buildings around. Ryan is saying for the composition, it could pull the buildings in the background on the left further out and then fill out the frame a bit more as well. Yeah, I think that could potentially work as well. You're basically, instead of like a sharp triangle, right, going up, you're then just like flattening out the triangle so that you have like a broader one. I think it's definitely less dramatic though. So I would potentially try just having like a portrait first. Yeah. Just so you know, not living by the coast. Oh no, I'm talking about, sorry, we're jumping all over the place. I'm talking about like reference for like the stonework, right? Not for like the fishing equipment. I think honestly for the fishing equipment, you can, yeah, it's pretty generic, right? Yeah. Cool stuff though. Glad to see you pick this back up. Gonna be nice. Let's see. Was there something else? Yeah, the composition feels a bit empty at the moment. Yeah, I honestly think... yeah, I would try portrait first. If you're not a fan of portrait work, which I get, I kind of did the same thing on like one of the projects that I had to work on. Is that you kind of have to like force fill in the composition, and that's gonna be interesting. How are you gonna do that? You probably just gonna have like more buildings that just fill out like a little bit more. Yeah. You can just reuse the ones that you already have and do like a really quick test, right? To see how that feels. I would honestly, maybe in that case, right? In that case, what I would potentially do is I would try to exaggerate the height of the main building. And the way that I would do that is by lowering the camera and just having it like more focused up so that you have like a bigger proportional or perspective distortion on the height of the building as well. Might add streetlights on the right. Yeah, you could do. Could be cool. Get more light sources too. Yeah. Cool stuff, man. Thanks for showing us. Let's see. For people that are just like flooding into the stream, feel free to shout out like any questions about like the games industry, my past work, anything that can help you get like a job in the games industry as well as an environment artist. Feel free to ask. Talking about questions, Crafta is asking, how long did it take you to go from junior to senior? This is very studio dependent. It took me... see, 2.5... Let's say 5 years to get to senior. Companies are getting into this mode of like trying to lengthen that out though. Like you might have seen like a very conscious effort of companies having like a junior 1 and 2, and then a mid environment artist like 1 and 2, and then like a senior. So I think what they're trying to do is like elongate the path for you to get to a senior position. Because there's a part of it that it's cool to be like a senior. To be like a senior and to have like much more responsibility and to be that part of the team, right? But yeah, it taking just 5 years. I think what a lot of people struggle with is that they hit that 5 to 8 years, right? Just as like a rough ballpark. It also depends on like what you're looking out of your career, because if it then also like plateaus, then what's next, right? What is your next goal to aim for? You could then go for like lead, but that is going to change your responsibilities heavy, right? Because then you're going a bit more into like management rather than art focused. You could also go to like principal, which like a lot of companies do now. But then, yeah, you're still going to hit principal and then maybe at some point like make a switch to art director. But then we're talking about like a path that goes from like junior to mid to senior in like, let's say 8 years, if we want to be like, I don't know, if we want to elongate that space. To principal is going to be 10 plus, and then art director is going to be like, I don't know, like 15 plus. Yeah, so you can see that the space between them is just like not proportional. Yeah. Doesn't really matter if senior or not. It does though. It does. Because there's a whole lot more, at least in games, there's like a whole lot more responsibilities that you have as a senior, and it does change a lot. Especially what makes the biggest difference is to me not necessarily like the extra art responsibilities, right? Because you're probably still building it up with like personal work and all that kind of stuff, and you get better at what you do on the job too. But usually you also get a taste of like managing people as well. And that's where, if you really think about it, and this is what sometimes people really misunderstand, is that you are responsible for other people's career growth. And also then building that into how they can become like a more valuable asset to that studio that you're working for now, but also studios in the future. I mean, the pay is not that much different. Oh yeah, it is. It's a huge difference. I can guarantee you, if I still was paid as much as I earned as like a junior, I would probably not be sitting here right now and doing like games industry stuff. Like I would probably be looking at like another job. Like honestly. It's not huge either, right? But this is where it goes into like, it gets really fuzzy because it depends on like the studio, the location, your responsibilities, like all that kind of stuff, right? Like there's like a huge variance there. Liz is asking, what do you consider a sign of a student leveling up their skills? Oh my god, there's so many factors to that question. I think in the beginning, in the first phases, it's a better technical understanding of all the programs that are like core to the environment art workflow, right? I think just building up that technical understanding with like all the different programs and like all the different techniques that you have to use, like going through that is already like a sign of like a student leveling up. I think the biggest jump then needs to happen that once you have like a really solid basis and you have like a good understanding of the technical factors, then you need to switch back and focus more on the art. But that's a difficult one because you're trained to do like everything so technical that you have to like break your brain a bit and then forsake some of the technical aspects for making better art. In my country, 3D artists pay so low. Where do you live, Mr. J, if I may ask? I would not want to apply as one here. I need money to eat. Yeah, and that's totally valid, right? That's 100% valid. Like, I do not recommend going into debt or like not making a living just to work for a game. I would not recommend that. No way. Because at the end of the day, it is a cool job, but it is still a job. And a job is supposed to get you money, right? If you can't afford to live like where the job is gonna force you to live, then it doesn't make sense. Mr. G is asking, do they count indie projects to your experience? Is there a difference between being a lead on an indie versus AAA? Oh yeah, there's a huge difference. Because the experience itself, like can translate to a certain part, right? But the difference being a lead on an indie is that you manage like 1 or 2 people, let's say, depending on the size of the indie project, right? Versus like a AAA where you have to potentially manage like multiple people that are managing multiple people themselves, right? So it just changes like the whole dynamic because it's really easy to talk to 1 or 2 up until I think scientifically like 5 people you can manage. But that's not the reality of what I've seen. I've seen multiple leads that have to manage like more than 5 people. And that is like, yeah, crazy. You get hectic sometimes, you know? And then they also have to manage like all the other things as well because other disciplines have the same sort of like hierarchy. And then they have to talk to each other as well. Whereas in an indie project, you can just go up and talk to them and you have all the information that you need right there and then. Whereas like in a AAA environment, it gets like more diffused, right? Because there's more layers to the cake. Are generalist skills needed as an environment artist in the industry? It depends on what company you go for. I know that I say like it depends a lot, but it really does. So generally, if you're going, the more AAA and the bigger the company is, the more specialized you have to become. Whereas generalist skills, like they're usually more valuable in like an indie space. Yep, you should not have to pay out of your own pocket to work somewhere. Would you be comfortable talking about what you think is a fair pay rate for different levels at the moment? It's easy for large studios to take advantage of newcomers looking for work. This is such a difficult conversation because it depends a whole lot on location. I think what I've seen, and I'm talking about like Europe and UK, right? Because those prices are like relatively similar. I would say, if we're generalizing, right, 25 to 30 as like a junior. So 25 to 30,000 a year. That's what I'm talking about. As like a junior. That's what I would aim for. But yeah, the issue with that number is that it can vary a lot. Because if you're living in London, that number is going to be pretty tight. If you're working somewhere else, let's say you're in Bulgaria, that number is going to be like probably like really, really good to live off. So that's usually the thing. If I can forward you to, what would be the best way to get there though? I'm trying to think. If you are a member of our website, and I'm talking about like just a free member, right? If you made an account, like you have access to like the resource database that we set up, and that has a page on how much you should be paid as an artist yourself. And that has like a breakdown of like most regions in the world with like a bunch of really cool Google Sheets as well, so that you can actually track specific locations too. And there's like a whole bunch of them there. And they're oftentimes like pretty tricky to find. Even though they're like pretty popular in the moment, but then they kind of just like disappear. Okay. In the meantime, let's switch it on up to some more feedback. Thanks for all the questions though. Really appreciate it. Who's next? Liz is next. Let's have a look. Liz is currently working on a modular piece and would like to get some feedback. I intend to make this door the same style as the first one in my reference, which comes from Diablo 4. I don't want it to be a replica, but something similar that resembles it. Do you have any advice to make it more appealing? Micro detailing would be added in the texture phase. Thank you. Okay, so you're making this modular piece for... For where? Because if we look at the image, I can only see like one door, right? It's still whip. Oh yeah, I know. I'm just more talking about the principle of it being like a modular door, right? That you're gonna use multiple times. But I don't think you need to, right? You can just make it unique. Yeah, that's maybe a little bit beside the point. The main door. Okay. Do you have any advice to make it more appealing? Let's have a look. Want to make things more appealing? It usually comes down to playing around with the silhouette, right? Or with the shapes of the door itself. So for example, this part looks really good. And that's because we're getting some variation in the shape, right? It's not just like a straight section. Like it actually goes up and has like it adds a lot of character to the door as well, right? And you're doing that in like certain other parts as well, which is really nice. You just have to do that on like every piece. Right? So, and that's what I usually call like giving it character. You wanna give everything like a nice sense of character. Right? But you're already doing that, so I think that's on like a good good way. I want to make this a bigger town. Oh no. Liz, don't do it. Don't do it. Focus on this one section first. I know. I would also not listen if this was like me giving myself feedback when I was getting excited, but please just focus on the town itself first, and then if you have that town, play around with it and make it as big as you want at that point, because you have all the assets done and it's just like about placement, right? Yeah, honestly, there's not too much to say. I think you're doing like pretty good on this one. Like the sculpt is looking really nice. I like that you're adding those shapes in it as well to add some variation. A lot of it is also going to come down to the texturing of this too, right? Textures are going to be like really important. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, there's not too much more that I can add to this, honestly. I think you're just doing good. You just have to trust your intuition on this, right? Keep doing what you're doing. There is some cool stuff. For example, this stuff at the bottom. Right? You could take that into account and like go that route as well. Where you could have, let's say, like this beam is kind of broken off here, and then this section of the beam is missing, but then someone tried to repair it with like a different section of a beam. Right? So it's kind of like, someone tried to repair it, but they're not doing that great of a job at it, so, it kind of looks like a little bit shitty, you know? You could play around with those elements. But then maybe even have like, I don't know, like a secondary thing behind it. A door height map? No, this is just a sculpt. And then I'm assuming that that's going to be baked down onto like actual simplified door geometry as well. Do you recommend to sculpt on ZBrush the upper part as a second reference? Oh, this section? So you can sculpt that, but I would use that as a decal. Yeah. Because Because the thing is, if you were to make it as a decal, you have more flexibility, right? Because then you could kind of use that on like other sections or of like other parts of the building where you kind of have like this sort of transition. It gives you flexibility as well. So the way that I would kind of play this is you would have like a texture that has just like a bunch of strips with like broken parts in it. And then you can use those as like little decals or like mesh decals that you then use on top of your base mesh with that information. That's the way that I would probably go about it. The reason is because if we would follow your line of thinking, right? And if we then make it like a unique section of the door, how are we then gonna blend that with the rest of it as well, right? That's something to think about. Because you could technically do that, but then we would still need to figure out like how we're gonna blend this with the main wall at some point. Whereas like you could just have like a decal that just like rests on top of it. On top of the decal. On top of the base geometry. Would that just be the normal map or normal and albedo, the decal? No, you would have like normal and albedo, right? Because you want to change the actual color of the underlying thing, right? So you could actually have it like expose. Let me be really specific here. An interesting one. So that is the stuff that I would do as a decal. This little section of a wooden plank, I would then use your beam, right? So that's going to be like embedded into the door. So let's say you have like another beam on top of it to like support like the base structure or like the door structure on top of it. And then you would then have, so this is still going to be mesh, right? So this little section of the door goes into the mesh. And then you can kind of dress that up on top of it with like a decal that's then gonna blend like the two together. Decals can go inward for effect, yeah. You could combine that with a technique that's called POM, parallax occlusion mapping, and that's going to give you an effect of it actually being inset into the floor. But yeah, that's the way that I would do it. Color Code Insignia, hey there! Do you have any feedback slots available for the stream? No, unfortunately not. This is a weekly stream for anyone that wants to have feedback on anything though. So if you want to give feedback, the best way that you can do that is just becoming a member of our community. And then you get access to like our weekly feedback. And there's no slots, like I just do everyone that kind of wants to have feedback for that week. Yeah, that's the way that I would approach it, Liz. You don't... Like, this is making it more complicated than it needs to be, right? You can just make like a simple texture that just has like the one decal in it, and that would work as well. You can do that too. Just keep it like as simple as it needs to be. Just as straightforward as it needs to be as well. Because whenever you're thinking about like doing anything in a trim, it then becomes about like the scale of the scene rather than just trying to get this scene finished, right? Because a trim is always supposed to be like used in... It's more optimal the more you use it, right? Because you're just pulling in the one texture. Yeah. Hope that was helpful, Liz. I would definitely have a look into those decals. Let's see, was there anything else in there? Micro detail will be added in the texturing phase. That's fine. Especially for the texturing. Oh, so for the texturing, you would honestly, you would sculpt it, right? So let me actually make some notes for that. So the way that you would do it is you would let me see if I can get all the steps. So step 1 is add a plane. This plane is gonna be our reference plane for our texture, right? So with a plane, I'm talking about just like a square plane. And what this plane is gonna do is we're just gonna unwrap that like 0 to 1. Because that's gonna be our placeholder for our texture, right? So that means that we can then use this plane to be like a guiding point for where we need to lay out like our meshes, right? So let's say in this case you want to make like a decal. We then take that plane and then we just add like a mesh to it, right? So let's say boom, we add a mesh in here. We're making sure that it doesn't go like out of bounds, right? Because we want to stay within the UV space. And then we can just like start sculpting, right? So in your case, that would be, you just have like a little crack here. Cool. You sculpt that. You bake that down onto the plane. So this is mesh plus sculpt. We're really simplifying things here, right? So, and then you can do like an additional one here as well. You can have 2 decals on the same one. Then you take that, you bake that down onto the plane, and then you just sculpt it like any normal mesh. The only thing that you would have to do is you would have to make like an opacity map that is around the damage, right? So you could technically only sculpt this, and then leave all this as like empty space with no information basically. And that's just gonna be like opacity, right? So you can see right through it. So the only information that we're having is actually on the parts that you sculpted. And then maybe, I don't know, like an edge to make it like look cool. Something like that. Right? And the rest of it can just be like opacity. You just see through it, and then you can kind of use that as like a plane that you can just hover over like other things, like a decal, right? So you only want to sculpt the thing that is going to add information. You don't need to worry about like all the things behind it, because that's going to be the tileable texture, right? So bake plus texture plus opacity. That's going to give you what you need. Cool. A little bit of an explanation there. Best of luck with the sculpt, texturing, and the decal stuff, says Ryan. Hell yeah. Okay, we're gonna dive straight into the next one. So we got Mekval next. Or Malta. Malta is working on a course for school. Decided to make a cargo hangar on a moon and a barren planet. As for feedback, it would love some initial feedback on the blockout if it reads well and is visually interesting. Wait, so what is this? A cargo hangar on a moon and barren planet. Okay. Cool. Have a look. I really scaled this down so where it's like almost impossible to have a look at it. Let me open the original real quick. Hudson is saying, change the tag on mine in case you have more time. No, I usually don't like pick up people during the stream because I have like templates and all that kind of stuff. So stuff set up as well. So can you do the other camera angle as well? Should be no need to. Not really. Unless there's actually something specific you want me to look at for that specific angle. But let's see. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Got some really cool ref here, by the way. Really cool ref for the props. The thing that immediately stands out to me is if we look at this, is I'm not really sure how to read this. Thumbnail is the main one. Oh, that's fine. We can work with this one. So the thing currently is that it doesn't look like it is a hanger at the moment. And I'm being like pretty straight up here, right? This is the issue of trying to design things yourself, right? It's really difficult to get it to look like it's actually supposed to look, right? Because you have to think about like what the core elements are of a hanger space, right? And you can see that in like the references that you have, right? And a lot of it is really big and really open. Where I'm just not really getting that from this section here. It kind of feels like it's more I don't know. I kind of wanted to say that this is more of like a delivery bay, right? Where you have like a truck, you back into it, and then all the objects get like put into like the actual hanger that's in like the back of it. So the hanger is actually the stuff that's inside of here. But this feels more like a dock where people can just drop stuff off and then have it like actually go into the hanger bay, right? I don't know if that's the purpose of it though. So it feels more like a delivery area. There's also like a couple of things which like really make it hard to read when it comes to like the sense of scale. And it's mostly this guy over here, honestly. Where this is like really recognizable as like a normal like storage rack that you would see in like a large warehouse, right? But I feel like most of the time with like a space station, we're trying to give like this awesome impression of scale, right? Like I'm imagining like huge ships just coming in, like dropping off cargo and all that kind of stuff. Because if we were to compare this guy, like if this was like a storage rack, right? Let's say, just making like a rough sketch here, right? So this would be like the back of a truck, right? So potentially, right? As like a rough estimation, that's the scale that I'm kind of feeling. So like a guy would be, yeah, let's say something along this scale. That's roughly how it feels to me now, right? Whereas I think what you intend is that it's more like this, potentially, right? But I don't know which of the two it is currently, because it feels like it's supposed to be the one on the left, even though I think your intent is to be like more on the right. Scale and proportions. They feel a little bit off. my idea was to make one malfunction and for it to be under repair, which is the one with the scaffolding. Okay, but even that doesn't really help with the actual base scale of the whole thing, right? Like a good solve could be like, okay, let's say we have like a very stereotypical thing of okay, let's see. If you see the walkway up top, that's about like 2 meters from floor to roof. So I'm assuming this is supposed to be like 2 meters, right? Cool. What is saying that though? Like you wanna focus on elements that kind of give it that sense of scale, right? Because these generic boxes, they could be like any size, right? Because you're going for a warehouse, so those boxes are not necessarily like an indication of like actual size. So the way that you could do that is by, let's say, what is that? Let's see. So there's like a little control panel over here. Cool. There's like a little railing of like, hey, don't go here. Right? And we're trying to infuse this with like a whole bunch of like man-made elements. Just maybe give you an idea. Let's see. Let's add down a ladder or something like that, right? Right? And then doing those things is going to give us like a better sense of scale. And you could do that with so many ways, right? Like I decided to add like a little bit of scaffolding, a little protective security stuff along the edges. You could also do that with different sizes of pipes, cables, all that kind of stuff. Just focus on assets that we can recognize. Let's see. For example, I mean, concept art kind of gets to cheat with like a lot of this stuff, right? But I feel that, for example, the one that we have here from Star Citizen that doesn't have a character in it, a lot of it is actually contextually like Whoa. Need to drink some stuff first. But a lot of it is actually contextualized through a lot of the man-made elements that is just like these warning lines and these like these warning lines, these security sections, like all the kind of decals, they actually make sense because that's something that we're kind of used to seeing. Maybe I'm a little bit biased because I used to work in like factories and stuff, but yeah, that's kind of like relatable to us, right? Same for the size of staircases, the size of the containers that are in that space, the size of walkways, all that kind of stuff, right? Like it's gonna be those are the things that are like relatable to us as people, right? Obviously all the ones with characters, they're cheating because like if you put a character in it, then yeah. Hey Jeremiah. Yeah, I saw your message. Wait, hold up. I'm going through some feedback over here. Let's have a look. So yeah, we want something that we can relate to, right? That's what we should focus on here. This is a thing where wherever you want to do like your own designs, you're gonna run into this stuff. Like you have to have stuff in there that we as people can be like, oh cool, that's a staircase, that's a door, that's this, that's that. You know, add those things in there. Like a little door. Cool. Little door that has like a little console next to it. Bam. Okay, now I know that like a guy is this tall. Cool. We can work with that. Let's see. What were some of your other questions though? Some initial feedback on the camera angle and the lighting. Oh, that's why you asked me to focus on the first one. Okay, sorry, I didn't read that. The current camera angle doesn't have a clear focal point. Yeah, I think it doesn't. I think that's also where you have to focus again on the story, right? Because you can have like a large warehouse, but what do people do there? And what is the story that you're trying to tell people? Right? In that case. Like, what kind of warehouse is it? Warehouse. What do they store? Who works here? Right? So, yeah. Think about those questions. Right? And think about the story behind it all. And then let that be like your focal point. Like, in my opinion, for like a warehouse, right? Like, the who question can become your story. If you just add like an emblem of like a faction and then you just call it like, oh, Warehouse 76 or whatever, right? Then you can just like use that as like a story, right? You could kind of make it like, it's a pretty bare bones one, but you could make it as like, hey, this is a faction of like, I don't know, this space conglomerate, and it's like an international shipping company. You could do something like that, right? Yeah. Yeah, this is difficult though. This is difficult. So I like what you have, right? I know that I always dive into like the feedback straight away. I do like what you have. I do like your ideas where you could have like scaffolding to kind of fix things up. I think once you have like a clearly defined scale and your proportions are good, and you like visualize that with like some simple blockout meshes, then rethink like the size of the scaffolding and kind of make it look more like a scaffolding rather than a storage rack, right? Because that kind of feels like it's just like a warehouse with like a storage rack outside of it, rather than a scaffolding where people are actually supposed to climb it and work on it, right? Like with a scaffolding, there's not going to be anything on the scaffolding necessarily because the people are going to be working on it, right? Also, how is scaffolding going to work in like space, right? There could be something really interesting visually that you can do with that idea there. Yeah. Interesting thing though. Like, I love it when people start building their own worlds, right? It is tricky, it is difficult, but it's definitely worth doing. So keep it up, man. Now, Jeremiah, let's see. I bring amazing news, waiting for the background check to be done, and then I will join PG soon. Oh, yeah! That's awesome! Awesome! I'm assuming... Well, we'll talk about that in private, I guess. Just wanted to thank you because you helped me to get there. Oh, okay. I didn't even realize that because it's such a long time since we talked. But that's cool. That's awesome. I hope the background check and all that kind of stuff like does take a long time though. It does take a long time. So it can be like a couple of months. At least that was it for me. Like it was just like the background check itself is actually like pretty simple. It was more just like all the visa stuff. Like that takes a long time. Thanks for the feedback as always. Thanks for keeping and putting up your work, Malta. I know that sometimes I'm like pretty direct and pretty to the point. But yeah, you got this, dude. You got this. Dinosaurs coming in. Hello, dinosaur. I thought you were extinct. Not sure if this is the right place to ask, or something you would know about. Would you have any insights in transferring transferring from VFX to games and art and design? Um, Not really. I was thinking if I know people that did that. I probably know a couple, but I don't know their story and how they did it and like what they needed to keep in mind. I feel like it's easier than ever now, though. And I've talked to some mentees about it too. But yeah. I don't really have like any other tips than basically whatever I say on like portfolio streams, right? Like it basically comes down to making the switch from the biggest thing is just like being more optimized with your work, right? Because in VFX, you don't have any restrictions really when it comes to texture budgets or geometry budgets and all that kind of stuff. If you're a pretty good modeler, like you just need to take into account that you have like a really restrictive budget when it comes to it now. Because everything needs to be running at like 60 frames a second like all the time. Right? So that's going to be the biggest change. So looking into like optimizations, you're not going to be using like UDIMs anymore. Everything has to be packed in everything has to be packed into like as the least amount of texture sets that you can. So yeah, textile density is also going to be important with that one. Sorry, I had a user on here, but it's been a while since I used YouTube. Definitely going to sign up to be honest. Oh, thank you. After another portfolio stream. So once a month currently. So one is coming up in the beginning of next month. But there is a back catalog, so it might be a while before you get to actually get to your portfolio. But you can watch like anyone else's portfolio though. Like they're right here on YouTube. Maybe we can meet up for lunch? Yeah. Yeah, if you're over here, let me know. Okay, cool. What do we have next? Dennis. I think Dennis is going to be a quick one. I've made some really basic textures to get an idea of how the scene will look later. I'm not sure what to do first. Work on a modular kit, make textures, start creating foliage. I'm a bit lost in the process. It's very simple. I'll give you like a couple of techniques. The first technique is biggest to smallest. What has the biggest impact on your project? Do that first. And then just work your way down to like what has the least impact on your project. And probably like cut out like all the stuff that you don't need to do. That's the way that I would approach it. That's like the sensible way. The other way, and it's a way that I usually employ because I am... It's a good way of saying this. Like, I'm like very creatively minded, as in like, I don't like to be restricted by like, hey, today you need to work on the biggest thing and then work on like the next thing. I like to have a lot of freedom. I have to have a lot of freedom in the way that I work. So what I usually do is I work on the things that I love to work on next. Right? So I love to go like feelings driven as well. The issue with that though is that I know what I need to do and I have this list in my brain like all the time. I'm thinking about this like 24/7, right? When I'm doing like personal work. If you're not used to like actually sitting down and doing work on like a regular basis, doing something that is like feelings driven is gonna lead you down a path or like it's not gonna help you in the long term. So that's why I'm saying like sometimes you just have to force yourself to do the biggest thing and then work down the list. Because if you're going this direction, like this has like a lower chance of actually making like succeeding your work, right? Because you want to be able to post it. Trusting your feelings and your emotions is usually not a good indication of what you should be doing. But I tend to use like a blend between the two. There's moments where I'm like, hey, today was like a busy day. I don't want to do like any like in-depth art, so I'm just gonna like do optimizations to my shader, for example, right? But there's also days when I'm like, okay, I got a full day of art. I'm just gonna crack down on that list from like biggest to smallest asset. And then I'll just work on it that way. Yeah. Those are like the two options that I usually employ. You just have to choose that for yourself. Like, I can't make that decision for you, really. Like, the objective way is number one. The subjective way is number two. That's the way that I would say it. Yeah, best of luck, Dennis. Best of luck. This advice is 100% the approach that helps me finish projects. Yeah, it's that's the thing. Like, I love to throw out like all this advice, right? And I don't mind. I just always want to have the caveat there that not everyone works the same way, and not everyone has like a rigid schedule or loves to work in the same way either. Because I tried a whole bunch of things, right? I've done a lot of experiments on how I work more effectively for myself. But that doesn't mean that is a guarantee for you to work more effectively as well. Because I tried things where I like blocked out like my calendar, right? Like very specific things. That didn't work for me. For me, what works is post-it notes. I have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5 post-it notes on my screen right now, all divided into like the different topics that I'm currently working on. So one is from the workshops, one is for the mentorships, one is just like miscellaneous stuff, one is Whip Wednesday, and then one is the book that I'm currently working on, right? And then I just have that all like spelled out on the post-it notes so that I can work in like a more effective way without having to think about like, oh, what do I need to do? But that works for me. It's not a guarantee that it will work for you. There's some science behind it where if you work with like post-it notes and you're actually writing stuff down, that builds like a better connection to your brain. So that kind of works for me, and it also helps when you like can cross it off and then just, you know, just like have like a post-it note that is like all crossed off, and it just feels really good to just throw that in the garbage. There's some science behind that, but that's really effective for me. What I think helped me to get the first interview was my latest prop I posted. You want to take a quick look? It's pretty dope. No. I don't have the time for that now, unfortunately, Jeremiah. We're going through some feedback today. I'll start with the first way and then we'll see. Yep. I think the gist of it is that you have to experiment with what works for you. That's the most important thing. Like, just experiment with things. It's not going to work out 100% of the time, but if you notice things like, hey, I don't really like this, like, biggest to smallest thing, maybe let me try, like, another way. And then if that was, like, even less effective, then you can kind of always go back to, like, what did work, at least a little bit. Yeah, I'll have a look at your latest piece later, Jeremiah. I'll check it out off stream as well. All right. Bulborb is saying, I try to use Trello and set deadlines. Gotta commit to them though. Yeah, see, that's the issue. For me, right? Again, I've used Trello, I've used Notion, I've used whatever productivity app that's out there, right? The thing that blocks me is that I don't have it available 100% of the time. So whenever I need to open an app and the app takes a little bit to load, like all apps do, like I'm already like, let's call it micro frustrated, right? Because I'm already like, dude, I just want to get up to date. So this is where I boot up my PC. While my PC is booting up, I'm reading what I need to do on my post-it notes. And by the time that my PC is booted up, I know what I need to do and I can just get into it. That's what I really love about it. That's also why I prefer PureRef when I'm doing like solo projects over Miro because it loads up like way quicker and I have like almost instant access to it. Yeah, for example, for work, I use PureRef as well. Just to keep track of tasks, I'll just take a screenshot, add like a note, and then I know that I need to do that for the next day. And like I have everything that I need on my PureRef. But that's only for me though. Like if I'm collaborating with other people, that goes through like official channels, right? Yeah. I like PureRef as well. Like just because it's so quick to open up. Again, I just boot it up, have it open at all times. And that's also because it's stored somewhere, right? So I can open it at home and then at work as well. Because if I then use like my post-it notes, I have like a bunch of post-it notes at work, but if I'm then working from home, I don't have access to them yet, right? So you kind of use like the tools for the situations and where you need them. Okay. Smuggling. Have a look at the next one. Smuggling wants some feedback on some props over here. It's going to be pretty simple. I think I'm going to just give like one pointer. Add character. We kind of have like a thing here where you did like a little bit of character adding. Right, but you can use like more geometry on this as well, where you could kind of have a paper that is like a little bit more outside of the stack and is kind of just like flopping over the whole thing. Right, so we could do that and have a look at an actual stack of papers, right? And especially with this stuff, you could have so much fun playing around with it because you have the texture and it's kind of set up as like a really good base. Now what I want to see is just, I want to see you like make a couple of variations where there's like, this is like a clean pile, right? And I want to see like a really chaotic pile and then just have like a couple of like them scattered on the floor. Like you can do some really cool stuff with this. Same for the box here as well. Like just look at a cardboard box, right? And all of them are gonna have like slight dents, slight warbling. You don't have to do any retexturing, right? You don't want to touch the textures. You only add like a bit of geometry and just like bend it in slightly. That's all you need to do. Like people are saying some dents or some wet damage to break up the box would be great on these. Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think I showed these. Ooh. Oh, I'm not gonna bother. For the studio project, like these details, like they matter a lot, you know? Where yeah, just like these details where you can see like the fabric, or like in this case like the cardboard folds, and like how people handle it and what's stored in them. Like you can really do a lot with the texturing. Side bends, damage. Let's see what have other people said. Liz is saying, I love that newspaper. Yeah, it's looking nice. Maybe some of them making them like a little yellowish. Yeah. Add some like variation in the stack too. Cool. Yeah, but that's what I would say. Like the rest of it looks really good though. You could also make you could have like, depending on what you want to do, right, you could have like these straps going across the newspaper as well, and then like tightly bundle them in that as well. That's just an idea. Yeah. I really like them though. Yeah, it just comes down to trying to get the most out of what you're trying to do with it, right? So for example, I like this stack because you can like neatly fit it into the box and it will look good. But like as a separate stack, I think you want like just like a little bit more chaos, you know, like a little bit more twist, like a little bit more droopiness, like a little bit more chaos to the mix. Let me add that. Chaos. Yeah. Cool stuff, Smuggling. Making some good progress. If you have a look at the scene as well. Yeah, that's looking nice. So this is a good example, right? So you have this image here. Maybe a bit less zoomed out. This image here is great. But the reason why I keep saying like, hey, vary it up a little bit so that you have like a little bit of breakup in the silhouette is because if we distill this into like the base shapes, it's a box on a box on a box, right? What we want to do is we want to create like variation in that. So what I would do in this case, if I was set dressing like a level, right, like in a game, I think the bottom ones are fine. If you have like two cardboard boxes stacked on top of each other. But what I would then do with the newspaper is just like scale it down a little bit so that we have like a change in silhouette. That is not just like a solid cube, but that we have like a change of actually having a smaller cube on two bigger cubes, right? And ideally you could then have like a bigger cube at the bottom so that you have like more support for the middle one, and then you're basically building like a stacking tower, right? But then you could have like more, let's see. You could have like more freedom when it comes to actually stacking them on top of each other. Right, and then ideally but you kind of always want to break up the silhouette whenever possible. The thing that I currently don't like about this drawing, for example, is that we have this one straight line here. So I would probably still scale it down a little bit. And then just like make sure that like this one is like rotated. Like let's say 30 degrees. So that we don't have like a box onto a box onto a box again, right? Like if we look at this from the top, it should almost be like something like this, where we have like a lot of variation in the shapes and it's not just like cubes on top of each other. Yeah. Cool though. Great progress. Looking forward to seeing like the rest of the scene though, because I know like this went a little bit into like set dressing and level art, but like that's a step down the line. Yeah, cool stuff. Let's move it on. So Archie is back with this little scene here. I'd like to share my video render, and in terms of feedback, I'd like to see if the way that I presented the environment works well in terms of camera shots and breakdowns. There's breakdowns. I haven't seen the breakdowns though. So the breakdowns in the video then. Okay. What I like that you did the breakdown. I like that you added a breakdown, right? Let's start with that. The thing that I don't really like is that the breakdown is kind of hidden in the video itself. Whereas what you're essentially trying to do with the video is you're asking for a lot of time from people to actually look at the full thing, right? And a lot of people that are in a position to hire you actually don't have that time. So you need to be able to break it down into images, and then if people want to see the video, they can do so, right? But like a video is always an extra plus rather than the whole thing. So what I would do is I would have your breakdown in stills rather than in video form. Like I said before, video is always extra. I like to see the way that I presented the environment looks well in terms of camera shots and breakdowns. So we kind of skipped to like the breakdowns, right? Because I kind of forgot about them. In terms of shots, I like it. I feel this one is definitely nice, right? That's the original concept one. I like that one a lot. My favorite one. I think it then becomes about like, what do you want to show off? I'm not too sure. I want to say pick one out of these. Because you are showcasing like the same environment in 3 different ways, right? What I would do is I would probably pick this guy over here. Because then we get like a far shot and like a close shot. Right? Whereas these ones are kind of just like, I don't know about them. Like I feel like they're just like not necessary for the whole thing. When it comes to an environment arts demo reel video, you don't think breakdowns are all that important? I don't think that demo reel videos in general are important. I think breakdowns are super important. But you need to see this from like a recruiter's perspective, right? Whenever there's friction in the process of having to click and having to wait, like you are losing out on potential chances of you getting hired. Because I'll give you a real scenario, right? Let's say I have to look at like 100 portfolios a day. I'm gonna look at your work pretty quickly. If I then have to wait for the video to load and then have to skim through the video because the video itself for one project is a minute long, if I then have to do that for like 100 people over an entire day, like I'm probably, let's say if you're lucky, you're at the beginning of that pile and I'm gonna look at that video. But let's say you're number 50, I'm probably not gonna bother with looking at your video. And I don't want you to take that risk of being lost in the pile, or like being lost because like the person looking at your environment has seen like 20 or 30 already, right? And they're just like a little bit tired and they can't bother to wait for like a video. So in that case, what I would do, again, like I was saying, I love that you did a video, right? I don't think the video itself is necessarily like an issue. It's only an issue when that is the only way that you can give the information to potential people that are recruiting you, right? If you had like an ArtStation post where we're going through like the whole thing and you have your breakdowns, and then you have a video at the end that does like breakdowns and all that kind of stuff like you have now, that would be totally fine, right? Because then you're giving people the choice to look at it. But now the breakdowns and like the interesting things are hidden in a video that may or may not be seen. And that's the issue with that. So I would not remove the video, but I would see the video as like it's an extra on top of like all the still images that you've done. That's the way that I would look at things. Hey Jay, welcome. Yeah, like I was saying, I would pick like one out of these three as well. I think I like the really close up. Me personally, I like the really close up and the really far one. And that's the way that I would structure it. So like two main images, and then let's say 2 breakdown images. I don't know how much you wanted to do. Let's say 3 breakdown images. Let me actually be like a little bit more accurate. So one main image, and then it doesn't have to be like specific, right? So like 1 to 4 additional images, but they need to be different from each other, right? And you need to pick the best ones for an environment like this that is purely focused around like a single camera. There's only so much you can showcase. There's only so much you can showcase that is not the same, right? So that's the way that I would think about it. That's why I'm being so harsh on like, just pick one, because especially these two, they're kind of pretty similar, right? So I wouldn't mind if, let's say, you pick this one, and that one, for example, or like let's say this one, and then you would have like 3 images, and then you do like your breakdowns on top of that, right? So you have like your one main image, the main, and then you have like your 2 additional ones. And then you do like, well, let's say 2 additional ones in your case. And then 2 to 3 breakdown images as well. Interesting. I always had that mentality that the demo reel encompassed all your good work was the most important thing that recruiters would look at. So I think that honestly comes from like the VFX industry. Because I see that happen a lot. I see people doing that a lot in VFX, right? Like that seems to be the norm in VFX. It's not the norm in games though. And there might also be like a slight difference in terms of, again, I don't know where you're from, but there might be a slight difference in like US versus Europe, right? Because I think demo reels is also like a bit more of like an American thing as well, because I mean that's where a lot of the VFX stuff is anyway. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with giving them the option, right? Because, for example, that's also why I recommend people, I mean, it's going to be applicable in your case as well, to use an ArtStation portfolio. Because it cuts down on the amount of steps that people have to take because they're already familiar with the whole format, right? And if you then want to break away from that format, you can do so, but it needs to be equally as streamlined as ArtStation, or it needs to be better. Like, you can't be worse, because that's going to introduce frustration into the whole system, and that might lead to you potentially like losing a job over it, right? And like, I'm going to say it's like a 1% difference. But if that 1% is like you getting a job or not, like you want to like maximize like the entire thing. Keeping this going at like 10:30. Yeah, we're running a little bit over, I think. But it's not too bad. It's not too bad. Yeah. Let's see. So the project clip is going to be front and center on my updated demo reel. So like the updated demo reel, you could still have that, right? But yeah. The rest of it you can definitely streamline and give people more options. Right as well. So I hope that was helpful, Archie. And I know that we didn't talk a lot about the Yeah, just to because you're saying I stress about making my personal website look good when ArtStation is probably enough. It is. It totally is. And I this is coming from a point, like from a person that like put a lot of time in like his personal website as well as a student, and then 2 years after, and then 2 years after, right? I did multiple iterations of my personal website, but ArtStation is more than enough. And if you, like I said before, like if you have something against like the policies of ArtStation, if you don't like what they're doing, if you think that ArtStation is falling off, that's all fine, right? But then that does mean that your personal website needs to be better or as good as ArtStation, in my opinion. Ryan is saying the scene itself is looking great, and that far shot is just fantastic. Yep, that far shot is really well done. And that was my impression as well with the VFX game split on a demo reel focus. Seems to be a lot more in VFX than in game art. Yeah, like honestly, what would the percentage be? I think 95 of the people that I've worked with in a professional manner didn't have a demo reel. Like they did have like some showcase like fly-throughs, right? But they didn't have like a dedicated demo reel, like showcasing like all the work that they did. Yeah. Great stuff, Archie. I can't see this. I can't see this. I can't wait to see this. Post it online, man. Next one up is Ryan. Ryan has condensed all the updates. New imperfections to the railings. Yes, I had a look at that already. That's looking nice. I think it kind of gets lost in this image here, but you can definitely tell from like the bigger image. I think the link got deleted. Are we not allowed to post links here? No, I don't think you can. And I looked into it, and I don't know how to enable it. So yeah. Let's see. So, added new imperfections to the railings and ceiling portions, and fix the cable dangling. No, I had a look at that already actually, and that's looking really nice. So I don't really have like any thoughts on that specifically. Just keep in mind that whenever you're trying to do this like contextual, what is it? Like contextual hang, or like where stuff like interacts with each other, right? It just has to feel like organic and real, right? It has to wrap around something, and then it has to have like a little bit of tension between the two or whatever. Like you're doing now. I think that's great. Right, so this kind of stuff. This also depends on like the material from the cable, right? So if you have like a stronger cable, you're gonna see less flex when something like this is gonna be like more bendy, right? That's cool. Like those little things, like that really makes your environment shine, because that is like the attention to detail that I kind of love to see. For example, I mean, almost gets annoying at a certain point, but like having these like completely straight, just have them like a little bit crooked, you know? They can still be closed, just have them like a little bit offset. That stuff, oh, so good. New decals along the floor and the walls, still no second texture for the vertex paint. That's alright. Would love to see if I'm heading in the right direction. I think honestly, seeing it that small is probably like reducing the effectiveness of it, because if I had them up like bigger, you can actually see like a lot of nice detail. Oh, right one. Yeah, you can kind of see like the griminess and all that stuff. Definitely going in a good direction. Definitely. New textures for the concrete along the base railing. Any rough spots to focus on as I iterate on these going forward? What is that? So, pipes in the gas meter. I feel like some of the textures, I don't know what it is about them. Maybe they're just not done, but it kind of feels like they're kind of blurry, especially if you could then compare the textile density that we get here compared to some of the more, like even compared to like the wall itself. I don't know if it's the texture itself or just, yeah, the textile density, but that might be something to look into. Might also be because the texture is not done yet, but any rough spots that I iterate on those going forward? Pipe trim texture in particular, I think it needs some work. Oh yeah, I think so. I think so. So, definitely agree. Pipe texture needs some love. Textile density might be off. Could be. That would definitely be worth having a look at, because it would be a shame that you create like such a nicely detailed environment to then have silly stuff like that happening. Technical silliness. And then the last thing, my thought is the missing textures, then the plans, and then the texture updates. Lowest on the impact. Yeah, so like it looks like the highest and lowest impact. Let me phrase that differently. You're going from highest to lowest impact, right? Which is basically what we talked about before. That makes sense. But you're asking me if that's about right in terms of like the high impact items for the main shot. So what was it? You said missing textures. For sure. Yeah, trying to get like a base for everything in. That's definitely a good shout. And the plants. Yeah. Then the texture updates. Yep. I think that's a good shout. And then honestly, at that point, like, because you would have you basically go from missing textures to foliage to and then honestly it's just polish. And polish is always pretty broad, but polish on this one, I'm thinking specific decals, you know, like really going around and thinking about like, okay, is there going to be a decal behind like this gas meter, for example, right? Because that's probably going to collect some water behind it. That's going to be dripping off in like a certain way. You can make that really subtle. Having like more decals on the floor, just like little footsteps of people. Very subtle again, right? But just having like some stuff to like really add that like final 5%, you know? It's going to take a lot of time, but that's where the magic happens. That's where you get to like distinguish yourself from like a lot of other people that don't take that into account. And then the color grading, right? I think color grading and infusing that like little color contrast that you have, going from like warmer tones to like cooler tones, that is definitely gonna like just push it over the edge. You kind of want to have those cool tones. That's going to be nice, just to have like a little bit more contrast in the scene and make it like a little bit less beige. Yeah. Cool stuff. Thank you for the update, Ryan. Great work, man. I love all the little details that you're adding in now. It's coming along really nicely. And then last one for today. In testing along the way from time to time to make sure it should work. Yeah, I think you can figure it out. Like, there's like a whole bunch of tips, like in the book, I think, where you look up like color correction. There's like a tip that you can just take it into Photoshop with like an LUT, like a color lookup table, and just do your grading in Photoshop if that's your flavor. Thanks for the feedback. No worries. No worries. Forgot to say, Antonio, hope you're doing well as well. Good to see you here. What link did you wanted to share, Jeremiah? Was that the link to like your latest prop? Last one for today. Lazar is trying to paint a stylized foliage atlas. Any tips on how to approach this, or anything would really help me tons. So my goal is to make an atlas that can be used for these kind of bushes and flowers, like from the reference. Yeah. But also add ivy. But I'm choosing to stick very close to the reference since this is my first time ever doing something like this. Okay, so first time ever doing something like this. Don't go into detail. What you want to do first, and again, this is like the whole game art workflow, right? Is you want to go from like the thing that gets you started the quickest, right? So, and then iterate on top of that. In this case, your block out is just the shapes of the leaves that you want to create. So in this case is just like you have your sheet and then you just say like, hey, I've got like a couple of flowers here, got like a couple of stems, and then like a couple like these leaves, and then like a couple of twigs. Cool. That's done. Now try to create meshes with those. Right? Actually test them before you then dedicate like more time on like actually making them finalized, right? So block them out, add like a little green color to it as well to make them a little bit more presentable, or just like a base color, right? So you make all these guys like light green, you make these guys like dark green, you have like a little pink, and then you have like a little white. Cool. Once you did that, let's see. No. Right, so you want to go from block out to adding a base color to it. And then you just turn that into base meshes. Test. And then just improve. Think. And that's the way that you should approach things, right? Is because then what you're doing is you have like all the things, like all the shapes that you want to play with. And if some shape doesn't work, then you can still like swap it out with like a different shape or with like a different element without then having to have wasted like a whole bunch of time in actually making that shape like really detailed. Right? So this is again like a very generic thing for like games in general, is that you want to go from like the quickest way to get something that's like visually representative in like whatever form that is, right? So that's like in 3D, like we have like a block out for things. That's because then we can actually start looking at things with that block out in mind, and then it just becomes about iterating. Same thing here, right? It's no different. We just want to have a block out of our shapes, then have like a really quick representative color on top of that, then do some testing when it comes to making our base meshes, and then it just becomes about improving and iterating on top of that, right? So yeah, pretty simple. That's the way that I would work. So yeah, I hope that was helpful. Pretty simple for this one, because also like you're gonna be, this is like a trim sheet as well, right? If you don't build with a trim sheet, then it's always gonna be really difficult to know what else you need to add or like even remove from a trim sheet. Because for example, you might add these guys and you're like, I don't like the shapes, or I don't know what to do with those shapes, so I'm just not gonna use them. But now you spend like a couple of hours like making them really nice and like texturing them really nice. That's like a bunch of waste of time, right? So take the shortest path. Yeah. Great stuff though. I think it's honestly really good to start with a reference and just basically trying to replicate the reference and playing around with it yourself. Because foliage is not easy. You're gonna have to dive into some specific technical things to make foliage look like really nice. But also just understand how to use those things is gonna be really, really interesting. So for example, right, like you have a gradient on here. And that works if you then use that as like separate leaves, because that basically means that if you have like a bush, right? You have like this bush. If let's say your starting point of like all the leaves is here and you have them like fan out in like multiple ways, that gradient is going to translate like really nicely to the whole plant, right? So that works. What about these guys though? Because you're probably using them more as like a branch that has these things on top of it, right? But then how do you get like a nice gradient like with a bush, right? Because you probably want to keep that relatively consistent between all the pieces of foliage. Okay? So how do you do that? Do you even want to do that? Like those are all questions that are going to come up with the creation. And the sooner you can figure those out, like in these steps, the better, right? So I would do, like I said, base color first, have like a simple representative color of what you want to go for. And then, I'm not sure how a gradient is going to work. Okay, maybe that's the next step then, right? Don't do any details, just add gradients to like all the leaves and see how that works. See how that influences like all the plants that you've created now. Because remember, like we've already have base meshes that are like a base representation of the bushes of or plants we want to make, right? So it becomes really easy to then just replace a texture if we don't like change up like the shapes drastically, right? It's really easy. Yeah. What is what is the process of getting the portfolio reviewed? We actually have a form for that where you can sign up yourself. And you can go to that page and sign up to get your portfolio reviewed. It's gonna take a while. We're currently dealing with a back catalog of people that want to get their portfolio reviewed. So it might be a bit. But yeah, I hope that was helpful, Lazar. Best of luck with foliage. Like Joe is saying in the chat as well, foliage is challenging. Yeah, it is, but it's also fun. The last thing that I will say, and this is more like just a general note or like a general tip. It is fun to experiment with foliage. I would say if you don't want to become a foliage artist, just use Megascans, right? Or like just grab some like stylized foliage that you already can download from like someone else, because it is like its own thing in a lot of companies. So I don't want you to spend like a whole bunch of time of like, hey, I want to experiment with like foliage and like really do it. Unless it is like a career goal, right? If you're trying to, I'm kind of seeing this from like a time optimized way, right? Yeah. Thank you, Lazar. And I think that's it in terms of people. So Just gonna chill out a little bit. Not too long though, because stream is pretty long, like Mr. J is saying. It is a long stream. It was a good stream though. Lots of really talented people at work, and I'm just glad that I can be along with them on the path, you know? Love the look of the concept and the ref. Best of luck. Yeah. There are plant artists? Yes. Foliage artists are like a separate thing in the industry. Like we have, yeah, every company has like a couple of people dedicated to that. I was one myself at some point. Even though technically not officially, I was making foliage like full time, like 8 hours a day for half a year to a year, something like that. So yeah, definitely a thing. I'm hoping I might be able to post again next week. I saw your updates, Joe. They were looking really good. Yeah. Like the size of the update doesn't matter, Joe. Like as long as you're making updates, that's all good. Do you have ZBrush? So expensive. No. I do not have ZBrush. I did used to use like ZBrush, like professionally, but I've never had ZBrush myself. I do all my sculpting in Blender as well. So yeah. And for the stuff that I need it for, like honestly, like Blender does a great job. Blender does a really good job of just, yeah, getting sculpting done, you know. Let's see. That's a good question, Liz. So I've never done foliage. Why is it hard? I want to try for this project since there's a huge palm tree on it. It's because there's a lot of performance that you have to keep in mind when it comes to foliage. And this is probably like more on like a professional level, right? But even the creation of foliage itself can get very technical. Like a huge palm tree, like that's probably like one of the more simple trees to make, because you could like sculpt it, right? So that's pretty easy. But like when you're actually thinking about like an oak tree, and you're thinking about like how you have like roots at the bottom, but you want to have like the trunk look different from the rest of the tree, and then you want to have like all the branches like blending into each other as well, and then those branches need to blend into other branches, and then those need to like transition into like nice fronds, which are like a collection of leaves, to then individual leaves as well. Like all that stuff, like is really tricky to get that to look right. Would SpeedTree make it easier? Yeah, it does. But honestly, for your case, Liz, I would honestly not. So this is my view on things, right? Like in your case, you're already learning so much that I would honestly do the palm tree like at the last bit, because I want you to finish like the environment first, and then if you still want to do like a tree on top of it, then you already have the scene finished and you can just do whatever you want at that point, right? But yeah, making trees is hard. And also on the performance side of things, right? The reason why trees are harder than like most other assets is because usually whatever you create in like SpeedTree gets scattered procedurally inside of a game engine anyway. What does that mean? It means that you have like thousands, if not 10,000s of instances of those assets in view at all time. Which does mean that if you have a tree of like, let's say 3,000 triangles, right? Times 1,000, or let's say a tree that has like 12,000 triangles times 1,000, makes a huge difference in terms of like what is drawn on screen, right? And the complexity. I'm obviously simplifying it a little bit to give you like a better example, but yeah, that's why a difference of like a couple of triangles on like pieces of grass makes like a huge difference because it's scattered so densely across the world. And alpha is really expensive as well. Yep. Because you have to deal with like a bunch of specific things like alpha overdraw and all that kind of stuff too. Yeah, shader work, poly count, maximizing texture space in your atlases. Yep. Super technical. Super technical. And then yeah, I would honestly, if you just need a tree in the foreground, or if it's just the one tree, I would honestly look for just like, I don't know, Megascans or like any pack that is out there. Hudson is saying Speedtree Workshop, we actually have one with like Billy Matthews. He's a really talented like foliage artist. So he does a great job of actually giving like a whole overview on how to use Speedtree for grass, shrubs, and then also trees. So if you're interested in that, go check that out. Yeah, I think we will probably have like more in-depth foliage creation workshops in the future. But it is a relatively niche specialization compared to other specializations, right? So let's look at like level artists. You have so many of them because the worlds are getting so big that you need like a lot of people just to make like really cool like miniature stories in the environment. Compared to like a single or like a handful of like foliage artists. "3D is a never-ending skill ceiling." Yep. And all the stuff that I like explained to you now, like that changes every couple of years. So take that on top of it as well. That's why if you want to go into like games especially, you have to be ready to adapt. I imagine foliage artists rarely get the spotlight too. I don't know actually. I don't know. Like I'm trying to think about this, right? But I'm like super biased because of course like I know a lot of people that do like really great foliage. Yeah. I mean, in a way, this is weird, right? So in the beginning of my career, what I wanted to do was make like the really cool, like unique assets, right? Even though that sounds like really weird in hindsight, because that was not the thing that I wanted to do. But I thought that I wanted to do that. But if you really think about it, like you make like that let's say making Battlefield, right? You make that one weapon, and then like, I don't know, like 1% of the people use that weapon, or let's say like 10% of the people use that weapon. Right? But if you then make like a modular kit that literally gets seen everywhere in every level, I'm like, I would rather work on that, like foundational world stuff, than like a thing that people just carry around something. Yeah. I don't know. It depends on what you want to do, right? But that's the way that I now look at things. Where I'm like, give me like the modular pieces because I know that people are just gonna see that everywhere. And I can build like my own stuff with it. Personally, I love seeing foliage. To me, it brings a lot of life to scenes. Oh, yeah. Like 100%. Like I love the interplay of man-made and foliage, where they get to play off of each other. Oh, that's like my favorite thing. Do-do-do-do-do. Let me just do one thing here. But I'm a sucker for overgrowth. Yeah, I mean, me too. Not gonna lie. Did you do work aside from... Did you do 3D work aside from games and films? I never worked on a film either. No, not really. All the 3D stuff I've done is just for like games, really. Or like game engine related. Yeah. Bulborb, I'm all for today. Have a great rest and enjoy the rest of the day, everybody. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here, Bulborb. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. And getting like moss and stuff underneath the foliage to blend everything together. Oh yeah, it's so satisfying. I'm honestly going to take an example from Bulborb as well. I'm going to head on out as well. Take a shower, chill out, and then go to sleep. And then go back to work tomorrow. So yeah, thank you all so much for being here. If you like this, you know what to do. It's YouTube after all. You've heard it like 1,000 times. However, if you want to become like a better environment artist, just go to like our link in the description down below. Become a member, and yeah, looking forward to seeing you in our community and hopefully helping you along your way as well. Lots of postings are for NFTs, and I hate it. Still? No, it can't be that. I thought they died out. Thank you. Have a good night, everyone. Yes, I'm going to chill out for a little bit. I hope you do the same. And yeah, thanks again for being here. Thanks for the support. And I'll see you next week. Bye, everybody. Oh, so satisfying when the button works. Hey, Dirty Paws in Twitch. Thank you for being here too. I love it.